Okay, so hopefully everyone can hear me. I'll introduce myself because I haven't done a webinar for a little while. So, hi everyone, I'm Becky and I'll be taking you through today's webinar. The webinars are usually around 20 to 30 minutes, so nice and quick, sort of give or take sort of 5 or 10 minutes. But I actually simply chose this topic as I'm finding companies these days tend to really starting to get the message about how important it is to know how their employees perceive their work conditions and their environment. So companies know how this perception can have such a big effect on how employees behave, and of course therefore in turn how it affects their productivity and their commitment to the company. We all know both of these areas can have very much a significant repercussion on the company's bottom line. So today's webinar, I'm simply just going to look at how we can use a specific technique in the behavioural assessments to help paint a picture of how employees might be feeling within their work environment. This is often referred to as, say, organisational or corporate climate. Climate is assumed to be a major force in influencing employees' behaviour, their job satisfaction, all sorts of things like their stress levels. So let's just have a little look. One of the things I wanted to do is just have a little look at organisational culture as well as climate. So as well as climate, there's also a company's organisational culture. This tends to show an even bigger picture of the health of a company. Both climate and culture are different, but of course there's a lot of overlaps as well. So let's just take a few minutes to distinguish the difference between the culture and the climate, as we'll be tending to look today at more of the climate in this particular webinar. So as you can see here on the slide, culture is usually described as the foundation upon which an organisation is built. It develops over a longer term and is made up of things like values, beliefs, norms, traditions, which guide how the organisation does its business and in turn how people behave. In simple terms, culture is often heard to be called the personality of an organisation. I really like that. I sort of associate with it a lot. So climate, on the other hand, can be described as something a bit more surface level and relates to simply the here and now. It's about what it feels like to work in the organisation, or in simple terms, the perceived working conditions of the employees. If culture is the personality, then let's say climate is more to do with the mood or the prevailing atmosphere of the business. As a rule, the climate is prone to a bit more short-term fluctuations and is determined by many factors, which include things like leadership, structure, rewards and recognition. So therefore this tends to be the one that does actually change a lot more. So just while we've got this up, just a side note, from a leadership point of view, as a manager, you'll recognise that changing the organisational culture can be a big significant challenge. In fact, it could be completely out of your hands depending on your seniority. However, you can greatly influence the organisational climate within your team by how you lead them. This has to do specifically with overall leadership style, but it also has to do with how you design or improve work practices, recognise and reward performance, and how conflict is handled. All these perceptions are built in to your employees, and they are watching how it is played out. Today we'll be looking specifically at using the behavioural profiles to help paint the picture towards the organisational climate, the mood. So let's take a look at that area a little bit more. As I mentioned before, there are different little phrases or terminologies that can be used to sum up organisational climate, and you may use them yourself. Things like you'll hear it referred to as workplace climate, corporate climate, or what I refer to it as organisational climate. Whatever terminology you use, it still tends to describe a set of properties of the work environment. They can be perceived directly or indirectly by the employees, but it's assumed to be quite a major force in influencing the behaviour of the employees and, of course, the productivity. So some of these perceptions are to do with things like communication, conflict, leadership, rewards. It's actually amazing that when an organisational climate check takes place, I often hear senior management say, gosh, I really didn't know that that was a problem in our company, or I thought that's how they all wanted it, or I didn't know such and such felt like that. We can learn that there are times through various reasons, managers, senior managers, etc., can get detached from what employees are really feeling. And at times, obviously the bigger the company, the harder it can be to see these perspectives, as they can get a bit lost in different structures and levels. So we understand now what maybe organisational climate is a little bit about without going into too much depth, but let's have a look at how an extended disk tool can be helped in actually assessing this. We have obviously a few different tools that can help with organisational climate, and one of them is surveys. But today what I really wanted to look at is using the behavioural assessments, specifically looking at the profile graphs in the assessment, but even more to do with looking at trends with the special cases. These can help give us an overview of what really might be happening or the feelings in that current environment. So trends in the special cases tend to give a picture of how people might be feeling, and again, this contributes to the overall climate of the company. Well, what I've chosen to do today is to get a full idea of how the assessments can be used. We're going to look at a very simplified case study. Now, I wanted to keep this really simple so it's nice and clear of how it can help, but in a perfect world you would be able to have a lot more discussion with the people concerned in this case study, and really draw out and confirm some of the conclusions that I'll be jumping to. But for now, this points out, an easy way to use it, and I'm sure you'll get the picture. So let's start by saying that this scenario in front of you here is a CEO of a manufacturing company, and he's called you in to help him with some issues. He says he's not aware of any major issues with his management team, though he says that there is a few performance issues with one particular manager called Manager 8, and I've clocked him on there as M8, and it's this manager that he would like you to shed some light on. So firstly, here is the extended disk diamond, and I've plotted both the CEO and the Manager 8 mapped in their respective quadrants. Potentially from this we can see that what their strengths are and their challenges are already. To me, they are looking like they're almost completely opposite in the diamond, and therefore their strengths and their challenges are also going to be very opposite each other, and that can cause issues in itself. Of course, if you really understand how the other works, then it's great, but if they don't, that can actually cause all sorts of misunderstandings and miscommunications. So these two here that you see in front of you, they would more than likely be communicating differently, decision making would be different, motivational needs would be very different, and also right down to how they engage in everyday activities. For example, the CEO would be a lot faster, just get in there and do it, and the Manager 8 would be someone who would need to think about it and take time, so let's do it right. And this is obviously, the more information you know about the disk styles, the better it is. So we've mapped it here on the diamond, so let's take it a little bit further and actually have a look at the individual profile of Manager 8. At this point, I'm actually going to jump to assuming that most of you that are listening today have been trained either by the new practitioner level or the older consultant level, so therefore you would have been exposed to the 10 special cases that we get in training. We often call the special cases expressed emotions, because that's exactly what they're picking up, as we can often see the feelings in the profiles through the size and the position of the line graphs. It's not, of course, written in the report, but is to be interpreted through the trained eye. So again, I'm just assuming that all of you are aware of these special cases, and today I'm actually going to have a look at a specific one as well, uncertainty of role. So if I bring up Manager 8's profile, as you can see on the slides, straight away he has a special case of uncertainty of role. That is identified by his tight profile 1. So he's got a tight profile 1 versus his profile 2 on the right hand side is actually fairly normal. Just remember that the tightness is caused in the way that he has answered actually the questionnaire, and that was the 24 questions right at the beginning. Again, tightness is formed when there's no consistent answering pattern established. So obviously it's also too, don't forget that profile 1 is his adjusted style, or in other words, the way he perceives himself to need to adjust in his current environment. So I'll just say that again. It's the way he's perceiving himself to be adjusting in his current environment. Gosh, I'm having trouble getting that out today. So the uncertainty of role, which is the type profile 1, this is the special case, tends to lead to areas of discussion that could be to do with things like being new in a position, an unclear job description, several bosses, no clear goals, seeking change or unclear areas of responsibility, if you want a bit more depth. Any of these make for great discussion with an individual when communicated well, of course. So you could stop there and start to work out what's going on with Manager 8 and the CEO by looking at the fact that he's feeling uncertain about his role. Or you could take it even further, and that's looking at the bigger picture. Let's start looking at others in the management team as well. So as you can see on the slide there, often to understand a person, we need to understand what's also going on with the people around them as well. How are they feeling? This is where we start to gauge what really could be going on. So you can see here that I have all the others in the management team up, as well as the CEO. All the other managers that have either a tick or a cross, the green ticks or crosses, actually have a special case going on as well. And that special case seems to be that they're all feeling this uncertainty of role. It seems to me that actually quite a few of the management team are feeling this. In fact, those that actually have the special cases, as I just said, actually are feeling the same thing as Manager 8. 5 out of 6 have that same special case, uncertainty of role. And I've put those in there with a tick. And the other person that also has a special case, Manager 4, he's also got a feeling of uncertainty, but he actually has a slightly different style. So you can see, I guess what I'm trying to reiterate here is you can start to build a picture that both that Manager 8, 1, 2, 5 and 6 actually all have the opposite style to the CEO, which is a high C. Manager 4 has an uncertainty of role, but he's actually a D style. So again, all I'm doing is simply looking at what's in front of me. All the high Cs seem to have this uncertainty of role, including Manager 8. The only one that doesn't is Manager 4. Let's just have a look here. So you can see now when I evaluate the profiles that don't have special cases that they seem to be managers that have a similar DISC style to the actual CEO themselves. The CEO has an ID style. Manager 3 is a DI, which means they would communicate in a very similar way anyway, maybe a bit more extroverted, but not too much difference. Both managers 7 and 9 are also an ID style and very similar makeup, and again you can see that there's no special case, even any special case prevalent in their profiles. So this could actually be starting to tell a story, which is what I'm hoping to sort of explain to you today. So in comparing the managers, I just swapped over a bit much. You can see here when you evaluate the profiles that actually don't have any of the special cases, you can see I've put them all on one side, and the other group, obviously there's quite a few there that actually do. You can really start seeing what might be a bit of a pattern. The ones that communicate in a similar fashion, they enter into activities, usually with that just do it mindset. They can work through conflict in the same sort of way as the CEO, and of course their motivations for rewards are also very similar. So for those of you that know your DISC styles well, you can understand that how the DI operates, usually fast, direct, autonomously, happy to implement change, etc. And on the other hand here with the other group, the mainly C styles in the management team are pretty much unsure or uncertain. So it's funnily enough the assumption that you can make with a bit more discussion in this situation, you'd be able to likely realise that the communication of the CEO could actually be the issue itself. The CEO tends to be maybe getting his message across, etc., to Manager 3, 7 and 9, and the message is not coming across right to Manager 1, 2, 5 6 and 8. So it's interesting to actually have a look. And of course, the more that you profile, the more these trends can really stick out. I'm just using one particular special case in this instance. But again, start throwing things like pressure and stress and some of the other ones, and it can give it really interesting performance feedback. So I guess here, so in summary, if we have a look now at the next one, the CEO obviously wanted some help with just the manager 8, but the organisational thermometer is starting to show more of a picture. The temperature is a lot more in the red than first thought, than just good old manager 8 having some issues going on. So with profiling the rest of the managers, we found out that a good majority of them are also uncertain. These 6 managers are more than likely having issues that might lead them to feel a bit stressed or a lack of job satisfaction, etc. But you get the point, all the stuff that goes towards organisational climate. These actually do really refer back to the organisational climate, so especially things like rewards, motivation, conflict, all that kind of thing is taken into effect. So what can you learn from this? What could be done? Again, just keeping it really simple. Well, here are some very simple learning outcomes to consider with this particular case study. The main point here is to get the CEO to understand and adjust to how the other managers might need to hear their communication. It sounds simple, but of course communication is always a work in progress, especially when you have this much opposite. The CEO is literally in the opposite quadrant to the people that are having the issues. Again, this can work really well if the CEO is aware of their strengths and challenges and vice versa. But if they're not, there can be a lot of disgruntled I guess team members underneath them that are all perceiving their work conditions to be not optimal, I guess would be the best word to say. So understanding this is just one aspect of what I can look for in trends and profiles and what it can bring to the forefront. You can just imagine if you profile each manager's team, for example, and evaluate what you see there too. So at this stage, I could even go a little bit deeper into looking at each of these managers' teams and have a look at how they're feeling under these managers, because you can imagine if this particular manager is feeling uncertain of the message that the CEO is trying to convey, imagine them trying to pass on the strategy or the message to their team. So it might be that their team members are also unclear about what's happening, or they might be showing other trends, other special cases like stress or pressure or whatever else might come to fruition. So there's also things like decision making and support, feeling like being left out on a limb. So obviously learning your special cases can be very helpful with this. I often map a company and do as many profiles as I can of their peers or direct reports, etc., to really understand the trends that I'm looking for, and then assess, put them into groups literally of 11 of them had this, 12 of them had this, etc., and it really does start to paint a picture of how people might be feeling and some of the issues with communication. It could be the CEO or the manager is implementing change too fast, for example, but all of this contributes to the climate and the feeling. At the end of the day, it's all about how satisfied they are, or their perceived satisfaction towards their working conditions, and this kind of I guess trend can bring to the forefront what it is that could be the actual problem. So again, a bit of a short webinar today, but I just wanted to sort of say at the end of the day, if the organisational temperature is climbing into the red, then this climate can easily affect employees' job satisfaction and stress levels. So simply using the profiles and spotting trends can really help direct the discussion path. And this is one very simple, easy to use technique. So, but actually for those of you listening live today, I also have another really great case study that is written about how the consultants use trends to highlight issues with a company climate. And again, it's actually using more than just one like I did today. They've used several, and I'm very happy to email if you get in touch and would like to read that. Um, Obviously there's other tools that Extended Disc has as well, and that is called the Climate Survey, which of course is fantastic. If used in conjunction with profiles, it becomes amazingly powerful. But I'm going to leave the survey in basically for next time, because we can actually go a lot more in depth and really show you. And there's a fantastic case study that we have that we can really log into different managers and really get down to the nitty-gritty through also two traffic lights that can be seen. So if you would like, let's just start, obviously crawl before we run, but let's just start by looking at these different trends. If you would like the other case study, by all means get in touch. Otherwise, that's a nice short, sharp little webinar from me today, just to say, hey, this is what you can do with a certain technique regarding climate. Thanks everyone for listening, and I'll see you next time, and we'll be looking at the surveys and how they can help with climate.